Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 579 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our sixth book just came out. It's called I'm So Beautiful, It's Ridiculous, Unleashing and Promoting Strength, Self-Worth, and Real Sisterhood. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, I usually don't talk much about medicine or diseases on the show because I always thought that medical problems were so far away for today's college students who are typically healthy and not really focused on advanced age issues. However, with more and more young people being diagnosed with cancer, I wanted to carve out some time on our show to talk about this issue and how we can help our friends or our family that might be going through cancer treatment. So, our next guest is Ruth Fein. She has a bunch of interesting titles. She is a medical and a science reporter. She's an award-winning author. She's a patient engagement leader. She is a motivational speaker. And Ruth is a globally recognized patient advocate leader with a proven track record bringing together the voice of the patient, the non-for-profit sector, industry, and academia in the hematology oncology space. Welcome to the show, Ruth.
Thanks so much. I have to say, phew, that sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot. You're very accomplished, and so you should really be
Well, thank
proud
you for that
of all of
introduction.
those accomplishments. I think it's fantastic. Now, anytime I have somebody on the show, I like to talk about college because I think it's really a formulative time for so many of us. And you chose Utica University for your undergraduate experience. I'm wondering, why was Utica the choice for you?
Yeah, so when I went there, it was still called Utica College of
Mhm.
Syracuse University. So it was an independent college of Syracuse. And I was actually interestingly accepted into the Newhouse School of Journalism at Syracuse. And I was so impressed with the program and how different it was at Utica College that I chose that over a scholarship at Syracuse.
Wow. Wow. You could have been a scholarship at Syracuse. Oh my
I still got
goodness.
a scholarship, but not as much. Yeah.
Not as much. All right, that makes total sense to me. All right, very good. Now, the interesting thing about you is you've been living with a rare blood cancer for 30 years. I'm somewhat familiar with some of this stuff. My dad has multiple myeloma, so I'm certainly somewhat familiar with rare blood cancers. But can you walk us through how your journey began, and then ultimately, how did that shape your work as a journalist and as a patient advocate?
Apologies for the dog barking. Yeah, so I actually had symptoms as a young adult, but they weren't recognized. At
Mhm.
the time, what I have wasn't even called a cancer. It was just called a blood disorder, and it wasn't called a cancer until 2008. So lots of misdiagnoses along the way, lots of, oh, you'll be fine. It's not life-threatening, and probably won't affect your life much. But over the years, it progressed. I have a myeloproliferative neoplasm, and there are at least three different types, and my disease progressed from one to the other after 3 years. And now I have myelofibrosis, which people in the community call the dreaded myelofibrosis because it is the most life-threatening. Um, but about how that affected my work,
Mm.
we were in the middle of a raging pandemic, and I had been a freelancer with the New York Times for a number of years. And I pitched my editor a story about MPNs, myeloproliferative neoplasms, because I thought what was really interesting is once they were called a cancer, all of a sudden this obscure disease started having money thrown at it and research and super specialists. And I thought that was really interesting. So the title was, when a cancer label is a good thing, right?
Mm.
And so when I wrote that story, I got dozens, I think actually hundreds of responses from people thanking me because they didn't have anything to share with friends and family about what this disease was. So I started writing more and more in the cancer space. And little by little, I made my professional world smaller and smaller. And I report almost exclusively on cancers or cancer related topics today.
Mm.
So it's really shaped what I do.
Yeah. How old were you when you got diagnosed?
I was 38, but
Okay.
I had symptoms that I remember since I was a child.
Really? Since you were a child? Oh my goodness. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so your book, it's called The Big C2, shares empowering stories for those living with cancer long term. What inspired you to write this book? And how do you think it's different from some of the other books that are out there on cancer?
Sure. So it's the big C squared, and the squared stands for double cancer, chronic cancer.
Mhm, mhm,
So it's the big C squared, stories from the chronic side of cancer. And it shares empowering stories, as you said. That's because I heard hundreds of empowering stories from patients, people living with cancer and their loved ones and care partners. And I realized that there's this gap, even among doctors, about chronic cancers. We just don't talk broadly about the difference between chronic cancers and acute cancers.
mhm.
And the other thing is that, first of all, everything's different when you live with a cancer for a long time, or if it's actually a chronic cancer like mine is. We don't get to ring that proverbial bell. When you have a cancer and it's cut out or radiated out or chemoed out, and you're thrilled that you're on the other side, you go and you ring this bell in the cancer center. And those of us who live with a chronic cancer, we don't get to do that, right? So I felt as if I wanted to help others because they felt very misunderstood and they felt invisible. Um, and there's a few simple changes we can make. It's not just about inspiration and information, it's that we can change some things to make us feel better and for other people, even young people who have parents and grandparents or siblings or themselves who are affected by cancer.
What a wonderful contribution that is. Of course, the book is The Big C Squared. My apologies for getting that wrong.
No, it's fine.
And so, but yeah, go out and get it. I think it's great to have those stories that you can share with other people in your life. What is the best way for a friend, a roommate, or even a fraternity or sorority member to support somebody who is going through cancer, especially when it always feels like we don't know what is the right thing to say?
Sure. So my advice is simple. Listen, 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 right? Listen to what they say, acknowledge their challenges, and also listen to their choices. One of the things we don't think much about is that we, as people living with a cancer, have choices. We all need support in different ways. We all have different needs. So listen to what that is. And don't assume that they always want to talk about a cancer, or any chronic illness, honestly. For me, I'm Ruth, who happens to have a cancer, right? I don't let cancer become who I am. And so if a friend or a loved one doesn't openly share their feelings about how they want to deal with their own cancer, or you want to deal with them as a friend or a family, um, again, listen and and be responsive to their emotions and their desires. Ask if they want to talk about it, or simply say, "Hey, I'm here anytime you want to talk." But also know that you may have to say it a few times.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great advice. And, it does happen quite, with some frequency, I think, with college students as well. You mentioned that your son had a life-threatening health emergency while he was in college. So what can the student listeners who are listening right now, what can they learn from his experience in terms of recognizing red flags in their own health or maybe a friend's?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's kind of like the signs that you see in the train station. If you see something, say something, right? If you
Mhm.
see somebody who doesn't seem themselves physically or emotionally, say something. Ask them if they're okay. If they just slough it off and say, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine," but then you don't see them for a couple of days, if they miss class, if they just don't look well, check in on them or have someone else check in on them if you're not comfortable. My son had a very acute, very quick change in his blood counts
Mhm.
that left him yellow, a jaundice, and visually yellow. He slept for about 16 hours straight, and his roommate came home and realized he hadn't seen him all day. And so he walked into his room and he saw him completely yellow. He happened to be a pre-med student, and said, "Something's not right. I'm bringing you to the hospital." Um, but be on the lookout for things that just aren't right. And if you're not comfortable approaching them, ask someone else to.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice. And it's good that he had that medical training to say, hey, I see something that doesn't look right to me. You need
Yeah,
to
he
get
was
some
in the
help.
ICU for 3.5 weeks at
Yeah.
Yale, and
Yeah.
we almost lost him. So it was a
Right.
biggie.
It's a big deal, and you got to catch that as early as you can. Had he not intervened at that point, who knows what would have happened to your son? So, thank goodness. I think the earlier you intervene, the earlier you say something, the quicker we can get this person help. So, really good stuff. Now, sometimes people do say the wrong thing, even though they have completely good intentions. Are there any phrases that we need to avoid when talking to somebody who has cancer? And what can we say instead that's actually helpful?
Yeah. Just simple changes in our language can really be meaningful.
Hmm.
So a couple of examples. For instance, instead of saying, but you look fine, you can say, hey, you're looking good. How are you doing today? Right. So that opens the door for conversation. It shows that you recognize that they might be struggling, or perhaps they look great today, but last night they, slept 14 hours, or they missed classes yesterday. So changes that help you and them acknowledge them so they don't feel unseen. Those kinds of things can be helpful.
Hmm. Very good. That's great advice. Well, you talked about some of the invisible effects of surviving cancer. So, for students who might be dealing right now with, long-term anxiety, trauma, or even uncertainty after treatment, what are some tools or perspectives that have helped people that you've interviewed in order to move forward?
Yeah, and this relates also to family and friends.
Hmm.
So if you've had a cancer or a loved one has had a cancer, you're dealing with a parent or grandparent or a friend, all of this is really relatable. So it's perfectly normal. First of all, know that it's perfectly normal to feel however you feel. Even if what you feel is that you don't want to admit the anxiety or stress you're feeling, that's still real. And maybe it's the uncertainty of cancer. Again, whether it's your own or a loved one, there's a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty causes stress and anxiety. Most important, know that you're not alone or weak or ungrateful, which is a great word. So, one of the things that happens for people who are living with or affected by cancer is we feel like we shouldn't complain. We shouldn't talk about our struggles because we should be grateful that we're alive and quote unquote wet in quotes well, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't carry some stress, even PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's a lot of important research backing that up. We've come really far, but slowly, and we're slowly getting to the other side of research and an acknowledgement that those emotional effects are real. The last thing I'd add is to find a trusted family or friend or a professional to talk to about whatever you're feeling, anxiety, stress, again, even the fact that you're not feeling that, and that is something because maybe it's real and you're just not feeling it.
Yeah, excellent. Really good tips. The medicine, this whole arena of medicine just really frustrates me in the United States so many times, over and over and over again. You mentioned that students only get about 17.5 minutes with a doctor every single year. The other thing that frustrates me about doctors is that everybody's a specialist. There's very few people that are looking at you holistically to see how all of these things are working together in your body. So I'm wondering, how can students or your friends or family, how can they make the most of the time with a doctor and truly advocate for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to visualize it like uh, a business meeting, or for college kids, maybe it's a job interview, right? You go in, you make a list ahead of time. You think
Mm.
of everything you can think about. Okay, how have I been feeling if there's any issues, right? Or what am I worried about even if I don't have any symptoms? Whatever it is, make a list ahead of time about anything that's on your mind related to your health, um, questions, symptoms, anything. And then think of it when you think of a business meeting, you go into a business meeting with an agenda, with topics or questions, and then hopefully you have on that list what I want to walk out with. What's the result? And once you've organized your visit that way, you're not sitting there spending time thinking about those questions and or forgetting them, because most of us walk out of our appointments and say, oh, I wish I'd asked about this, or oh, I meant to ask about this. Yeah. So a list is really, really helpful.
Excellent advice. Be prepared. And I like comparing it to a job interview. You would never go into a job interview and know nothing about the company or the person that you're meeting with. Like you would just never do that.
Right.
And I think the same thing should be true for your medical appointments. I mean, come in with a plan
Yeah.
and really give it some thought because if you only get that 17.5 minutes, you don't want to be thinking, oh, I missed an opportunity to ask a really important question. All of those things should be vetted and talked about in and thought about in advance of the appointment so that way you can be productive.
Yeah, if I can jump in with one thing that a younger person might not think about.
Mhm.
On that list, I would add a genetics question.
Oh
I would
yeah.
think about what does your mother, your father, aunts and uncles, perhaps a sibling have that could be either hereditary, which means there's a direct genetic cause that you could have inherited, but also things are familial. What familial means is that they run in families, even though it's not a direct inherited condition.
Yeah, so important. I mean, knowing my dad's full medical history, which is lengthy, it's not easy to get all of this stuff down, but you want to sit down. I sat down with my dad. I know he's like the medical problem of the family. And so we sit down and we've come up with a list of everything that he has. So that way I can just take a copy of that list and hand it to the doctor that I'm meeting with so they understand kind of where I'm sitting. That, oh, by the way, there's multiple myeloma here. There is kidney problems, there is diabetes. These are really, really important pieces for a doctor who's meeting me, this guy's son, to know that, hey, these are things that we want to be on the lookout for. So do that interview with people in your family that you know have some kind of medical history to talk about, and then jot all that stuff down. So that way in the future, maybe that person's no longer here. At least you still have documentation on what pitfalls you want to be looking for in your future medical history. So important, really good stuff. Now, you have been a voice in the push for more research and better access to clinical trials. I think that's fantastic. My daughter is a student at Rice University in Houston, Texas, right across the street from a major medical center in Houston. I would love for her to get involved with medicine. But, what do college students need to know about the future of cancer treatment, and why should today's college students really care?
Yeah, the care question is a big thing because they have a lot on their minds, right? Your
Mhm.
listeners are juggling so many things currently and worrying about their future, right? So you don't have to be politically active, though, to be certain that massive cuts in funding for medical research will slow our scientific progress. And that's important to everybody. It's important to your future, our future. And it matters because it's the way that we bring new and better treatments to people with cancer and all kinds of conditions, whether it's research in the lab or it's clinical trials. I've been on a clinical trial for nearly 6 years, which shows clinical trials aren't always a last resort.
Mhm.
um, our newest and best drugs are in clinical trials now, and that's because our scientific advancements happen so quickly that there's amazing work being done right now, and the best access to the latest drugs and treatments is in clinical trials. But you can become active showing your objections to the slowing of our scientific progress. One example is a simple call to an elected official, and you can access information really easily online, who your representatives are, how to reach them. There's even instant ways, click here and they'll send a message with your name on it. You can cut and paste a message. You can make a phone call and not worry about what am I going to say because it's all out there. You can just find it, in 5 minutes. The reason that matters is I speak to a lot of elected officials. Just last week, my own congressman, and I said, we always tell people to call their elected officials, and I know that that matters, but tell me how much it really matters to you. And he said, if we are hearing our phones ringing off the wall and our own staff can't keep up with their work because they can't do anything but answer phones, or even our voice message system gets full, that means something. It means something to us. And so you don't have to be political to get involved. But just know that the cuts that are being made to scientific research, including clinical trials, will affect us and you and everyone because it's going to slow progress.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about some of those cuts. I think it's what we're seeing here recently within the past few months has been alarming. Whether we're talking about some of the cuts to research at Harvard or other institutions that are doing really important work that I'm not sure who's going to do that work in its absence. So I'm absolutely concerned about it.
Yeah,
And what, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say, I've spoken to researchers who aren't sure how they're going to pay their utility bills to keep the
Yeah,
lights on
yeah.
because it's gotten to that point. And so, yeah, it's a serious problem. I wanted to add to that though, that our scientific knowledge and our understanding has just skyrocketed in just 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, not to look at 10 years, So there's so much hope out there. And
Mm,
I call it fact-based hope, meaning there are facts to back up why I feel hopeful.
mm.
And so it's not doom and gloom. We're in an amazing place in cancer research as well as other chronic conditions. It's just slowing that rate of progress is sad and dangerous.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's a huge advantage, especially in the United States. I mean, it's such an advantage for us over other countries, the types of advances that have been made recently. As somebody who thinks about his kidney all the time, I mean, they're talking about doing, pig kidneys, for the
Yeah.
100,000 people that need a kidney. I mean, that is just like tremendous. I mean, think about that. There's 100,000 people waiting for kidneys right now. And in 5 years' time, there's probably going to be pig kidneys for everybody because they're going to be able to, mass reproduce these kidneys that are the same size of the human kidney. And you won't even be able to tell the difference if you did an ultrasound, whether it's a pig kidney or a human kidney. Amazing. I mean, who
Isn't
thought we
it?
would be here? Just amazing, just amazing. All right. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, because there's a lot of myths about cancer. Is there any really big myth about cancer that you wish that we could just erase?
Yeah. Well, today's cancers aren't what you think. And that's because of those myths, right? So they aren't always over and done with, and then we get to move on. They often come with emotional effects that are long term and with a need for the kind of emotional support that's different than what we have historically associated with cancers. So I would like that myth that um, cancers are a death sentence. That's one myth. No, not today.
Mhm.
Um, and cut it out, radiate it out, get rid of it, and I want to move on my way. That's a myth only in the sense that however fortunate you are to be treated and cured, I don't want people to discount that emotional stress and anxiety that can go on for a lifetime, and we need to look at that.
hmm Yeah, there's so much hope for people out there. And my dad always says, if I can live long enough, then someone's going to come up with a solution for this, whether it be multiple myeloma or yeah, anything else, right? And the other really nice thing too, that's kind of related with fraternity. There's a fraternity out there called Sigma Chi, and they team up with the Huntsman Institute to raise millions of dollars every single year for research. And just God bless those fraternity men for doing the work that they're doing because they really believe that they're going to be the generation to end cancer. I mean, they believe it in their hearts. And there's nothing more appealing than that kind of a victory for Gen Z. Like they want to be part of that winning team. And so I think they're really building something very special at Sigma Chi fraternity. So I just want to give a tip of my cap to the guys of Sigma Chi who are out there raising tons of money for the Huntsman Institute and doing really, really good work. I don't think we talk about that enough.
Yeah.
We can talk about a whole bunch of things about fraternity and sorority that we can improve, and I'm on the front line of that. But also, we should recognize the good work that's being done by college students to help end cancer. And I think Sigma Chi is leading the charge. So kudos if you're a brother of Sigma Chi for the work that you do. Now, if one of our listeners is quietly struggling right now with their own health, or maybe somebody who's close to them, maybe it's a brother or a sister or a parent, what message do you want them to walk away with from this conversation today?
Yeah, the best way to end this conversation. You aren't alone. I think that's the most important thing. Talk to someone about how you're feeling. There are not-for-profit organizations, online support groups, other resources that focus on what they will call care partners or caregivers. But it can also be really helpful for family and friends. What you could learn, even if you don't want to share your own feelings, what you learn can be very helpful.
Hmm. Can you give us a couple of examples of resources along those lines that you like?
Yeah, sure. There's an organization I do a lot of work for called Patient Power, and
Okay.
you will find them at patientpower.info. And that's specifically cancer, but it's all different kinds of cancer, and it's an incredible resource for information of experts, right? So what you have to be careful of on the internet, of course, is finding reliable sources, because if you just Google things, we call it asking Dr. Google, you aren't necessarily going to get the full picture. So, and yet you don't have to go read medical abstracts like I do. There are resources that will translate that, the way I translate those kinds of scientific advancements into what I call human talk, right? Understandable. So there's Patient Power, there's an organization called Health Tree Foundation. They started out in the myeloma space and multiple myeloma, like your dad, and
Mhm.
they are now branching into all different types of blood cancers. I'm helping them do that, in fact. There are several, depending on the type of cancer, whether it's breast cancer or endocrine cancer, whatever it is, there are all kinds of resources out there. So rather than Googling facts, Google organizations, reliable organizations, regarding the questions you have or the condition you're most interested in.
Excellent. Patientpower.info. Go and check that out. That's a really good
Yes.
place, I think, to start. And if Ruth advocates for them, then I'm a firm believer. So,
And Health
Ruth,
Tree Foundation is doing found a fantastic job also.
100%, 100%. Really good work out there. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for sharing just a wealth of information with our college student listeners today. We really appreciate the work that you do. So keep doing it. I'm proud of you and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And if this conversation made a difference for one person, I'm where I should be. So thanks.
100%. You're exactly where you
Best to your
belong.
dad.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Ruth, please like it, share it with somebody in your life that needs to hear Ruth's words. When we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.